What? Oh, right. Are we ready to go?
Yep.
All right. Darren, Riddler, Reece, thank you so much for coming today, man.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Been meaning to catch up and have a good chat for a long time.
Yeah.
What brings you to Melbourne?
We've got the Dynamite Naksu female tour that's on the fights tomorrow night, so I've got a couple of my girls fighting on that.
Yeah, awesome. Now, you've got probably the most active Muay Thai team in all of Australia. I'd say I'd struggle to think of another a gym like that, and another trainer who has so many fighters on so many shows all around Australia. What's been the secret to keeping your fighters so active, considering you're so far away and it's so hard for promoters to basically get you guys around?
I don't know. Just the guys are in the gym, and the fights just seem to keep coming. Because they're in the gym and they're training. I always encourage them to be training because you just never know when fights can come up, and that's the case. And if I get a call and it's in 2 weeks and they've been training, then they can take it, and when it's further in advance, then it's even better because they've got the preparation time for it. But yeah, it just seems to keep coming, and because more people is more options and more matches, so I think that's why it keeps happening.
Yeah. So I think anyone who's watching this, who watches Muay Thai, would know about you, but for those guys who don't know, you're a fighter, a trainer, a gym owner and a promoter. With your Muay Thai sort of journey, at what age did you get started?
Why did I get started?
At what age did you start?
I started when I was 18, so I was coming out of a long swimming career, a little bit of triathlon for a couple of years, and I actually had a couple of accidents on bikes, and just got to the stage where my mum was like, "Can you please do something safer?"
Yeah.
So,
Did Muay Thai.
I got into Muay Thai and martial arts. So yeah.
Was your first foray into fight sports martial arts Muay Thai or other stuff?
I started in Zendo Kai, which
was it here or
which
in
is
Perth?
a freestyle martial art in Perth.
Yeah.
But for me, my trainer was he was an active fighter back then. He was the current state champion back in those days, 1989 that was. So the very early days when they were fighting in pubs and things like that still. And so a large part of our training, was a lot less katas and freestyle martial arts and more sparring and things like that, obviously to suit a little bit of his training as well, but worked out great for me. It really got my blood going for it.
Yeah, so is that the sort of the reality and the hard work that goes into preparing for fights? Is that what attracted you more into Muay Thai, coming from something like triathlon, which is a lot of work?
Yeah, but I think it was just the competitive side. I never started with that intention. I got into what I thought was the martial art, and obviously Muay Thai is a martial art, but initially doing some katas and doing some ground stuff and all that kind of thing. But like I mentioned, a large part of our training was actually sparring and things like I think I sparred my first night of training in 12-ounce gloves and the thin foam shin pads, like you just wouldn't see it these days.
Yeah.
But that's just how it was back then, and that's what we did.
How long did you train before you jumped in the ring for the first time?
It was about 18 months to 2 years.
Yep.
So, and then after I sort of had my first fight with that instructor that I started with, he said, I said to him, this is what I want to do a lot more. And he said, I recommend you go to a fight gym, a Muay Thai gym. So.
And which gym did you end up going to?
From there I went to Mark Jones, which was another BJC gym in Perth, in Fremantle actually. And then from there I broke off from there and started going to Thailand and doing a lot of my stuff.
Yeah, how many fights did you end up having in Australia before you went to Thailand?
I'd only had 2 or 3 fights in Australia before I started fighting 5-3s in Thailand. So I think my 3rd, 4th and 5th fights were 5x3s in Thailand.
Wow. Were the fights here like full Thai, or were they mod Thai? Or
Back
was
then
it?
they were mod Thai, so
Yeah.
they were no elbows at that stage.
Yeah.
But clinching. But yeah, what we called mod Thai back then, so
Yeah.
no elbows. It was a lot newer.
Yeah, and you fought 4 times at Raja,
Yeah. Yep.
and won all 4 of them.
Yeah, all 4 of them. Yeah.
What weight were you fighting at?
In Thailand, I was fighting 65 to 66, 67.
So still a pretty sort of competitive weight class.
Yeah.
And 1 time at Lumpini.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And those early memories of going to Thailand, obviously, like something that we've all probably remarked on, like back then to compared to now, the going to Thailand and fighting and training experience was a really different thing. Was now every sort of out of a gym of 20 people, 3 or 4 people go to Thailand and they'll go to Phuket or something and have a fight there.
Yeah.
What was it like going there as, around a time where there wasn't a lot of foreigners, there wasn't a lot of touristy gyms and sort of training and fighting?
Well, my first trip, I actually started at Sityatong Gym in Pattaya, which
Was that through the BJC connection? Or?
I think probably, or no, probably not that connection, but just the fact that back then that was where a lot of people went to. But it was kind of the fact that there were Westerners there that put me off of that. So I found I got very, apart from having 3 fights in 3 months, I felt that I got very little out of the trainers. They were just, they're going through the motions.
Yeah.
So, my next trip from there was to Bangkok.
Yep.
And I tried a place called Jockey Gym
Yep.
in Bangkok for a month, but again I didn't really gel with that place, and from there I went to Sang Morakot. So
Yep.
the owner of that gym was very good friends with a resident Thai in Perth, Pon Marti,
Yep.
and he recommended me to go there, and I went there, and the rest is history. I settled right in there.
Yeah, and there's a big connection now between Sang Morakot and the Perth Muay Thai scene. There's a lot of trainers.
A lot of the trainers there in Perth were current fighters, Jack 300 and other fighters like Olay Sukumpet and things like that. Were all active fighters that I trained with every day and clinched with and sparred with and things like that. So yeah, there's like more than a 20-year connection with a lot of those guys.
Do you remember like going back after having fought in Australia and Muay Thai, and all of a sudden going to Thailand? You're at the mecca of Muay Thai, and you're sitting there before your fight. What was going through your head? Can you remember back to?
Just that, wow, this is so different, and almost feeling like, wow, I've made it, or I'm doing what I dreamed about and doing it, and then going back to Australia and fighting after having a lot of fights in Thailand. It just seems so different, like one of my nemesis before I started living and fighting out of Thailand, one of my nemesis was a guy called Jason Skinner, and when I fought him twice over a small period of time, and at that stage he was double my fights, and he pretty much caned me both times. And then after a good spell in Thailand, I think the next time I fought him I was nearly double his fights, and it was kind of definitely went the other way.
Yeah.
And after you've been fighting Thais, it seems like Westerners kick so slowly
So they're going in slow motion.
and so
yeah.
softly.
Yeah.
So after being kicked by Thais, so
Yeah, and it's like you had 70 fights.
73 fights.
73
yeah.
fights. What was the split between here and Thailand?
I probably had around 30 fights in Thailand, and the rest in Australia.
When you look back to the fights, the highlights were more the fights in Thailand, or some in Australia as well?
Definitely a few of the fights in Australia, the ones that meant something or got you somewhere, got you exposure, which back in those days was a mention in international kickboxing.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as Facebook or anything like that around. You'd maybe
So you didn't have an athlete page after your second fight?
No. You'd maybe think to send an email to Michael Chiavello, and it would get a mention in the news of the International Kickboxer magazine or
Yeah.
something like that. That was about as far as it went back in the day.
Yeah. And who's the Australian fighters that who was the guys that you fought back then? Some of the bigger sort of fights you had?
I had a couple of fights with Soren, with Craig Hammer-Hogan from Nuggets Gym. Always had good fights with those boys. Jason Skinner, who I fought 3 times over a couple of years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And at what point, did you stop fighting and then take a break away from it and then get into being a trainer? Or was that something that started blending in towards the end?
I had a break from Muay Thai for a couple of years, which wasn't by choice.
Yeah.
When I came back, it was something that I had to do. Because at that time that it was taken away from me, was kind of like the peak of my career, so I just had unfinished business. So I was on a mission when I came back, and I was self-trained in the later part of my career, from like 50 fights to 73 fights. I did a large part of that training on my own, or with just training partners. And then I later in my career, I started my gym knowing that I was going to be it was time to wind down soon. And so my fighters that I had at that time, Chris Tiger White and a couple of other guys that came to me, were my training partners as well as my students. So we'd all train together and look after one another. And my mate Brett Dalton would often help me with the corner in my fights.
Did you bring Thai trainers over as well, or?
No, I didn't. No, yeah. Financially, I wasn't in a position back then. In the early days when I started my gym, and when my gym was more established, I did bring over Thai trainers for a while. But then I got to the stage where I felt like I had enough experience in the gym as a trainer, and I also had the opportunity to give to my own boys, as they got late in their careers, or actually wanted to finish fighting and actually wanted to help hold pads. Yeah. So I went that way.
Where did the name Riddler come from?
It actually came.
I can't believe I've never asked you this.
It came from Michael Chiavello.
Oh, right.
So the first time I fought in Melbourne, I fought with Barish Nazif, and I had question marks on my shorts, which I had made in Thailand, and he'd seen me fight a couple of times prior to that, and it was different each time. Meaning that you sort of mould, or you fight to beat your opponent to suit what's happening with the style of the fight. So, and I guess it rhymed with Reece, Riddler Reece, and had a bit of a ring to it, and it stuck back then. Back then everyone sort of had fight nicknames. Nugget, Riddler, and everyone used those names.
And Chiavello would have given out a lot of those names.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, because of the exposure on Fox Sports. So,
obviously, over the years, what's happened with Fox Sports and the exposure, and we talk about International Kickboxing Magazine that recently it ended. How's the scene changed from what you see? Because you've gone through those early stages of not really Muay Thai, like you said, modified Thai, to getting a little bit more exposure, being on Foxtel with Evo and a few of the other shows, and then we sort of had that blackout period where we weren't on TV, and now things are changing a lot with social media and YouTube and guys knowing each other. What's as far as the quality of fighters and the experience of bringing fighters through, what are you seeing changing over that time?
I'm seeing, what I've seen, back in those days when it was like on Fox and Evo and those kinds of times, with the exposure to mainstream, what we'd call mainstream, like the reputation and the following of the fighters was probably the hugest it's ever been.
Yeah.
And the exposure now for the fighters, like on Muay Thais from Rebellion and shows like Epic and things like that, it's bringing lots of exposure to the fighters, but it tends to still not be mainstream. It tends to be people that are just interested in the sport, in comparison to when it was on Fox Sports every night, and people flicking channels on Fox Sports would flick to the fighting and start watching Muay Thai, and names like John Wayne Parr and Preacher and Carnage and all those guys, they were probably the most widespread names that we've ever had in Australia.
Yeah, because even now, if you speak to someone who doesn't know anything about Muay Thai and they'll ask me, well, what are you doing? It's like, I promote shows and run gyms. they'll know those names. They'll know
still
Wayne
know
Parr, and
those
doesn't matter
names.
what. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that's happening now. There's a little bit of a void of the superstars, not by the quality of fighting what they've achieved, but just the mainstream exposure, like
Yep.
you said.
Yeah, and like that's basically all it is. That's the difference, because the quality of the fighters now is amazing. Like the fighters are so much better sooner
Yeah.
because their trainers have been fighters. You know, like all my guys benefit from all my 70 fights experience. You know, they're not having to and don't make the same mistakes that I made cutting weight, learning to taper, all those kinds of things. You know, like with my guys, we prepare hard, but we also taper really, really well, a lot differently to a lot of other gyms.
Yeah.
And as a result, my guys are fresh on the night, and they don't look tired, don't get tired.
Yeah.
So I think that's got a lot to do with it, because they're not smashing 5 rounds on pads until they've got to cut weight. So
That's there's two things that come out of that. That's like, one is the 3 or 4 times I've been over in Perth for Domination and Epic, and I've commentated. That's one of the noticeable things I tell everyone is, you sit there and you see the 2 corners, and the corners are just the amount of experience there. Yourself, Blair, Kurovic,
Yep.
all those guys that are there, Preacher, Eugene, all those guys. It's like the wealth of knowledge and the culture of it. It's why Perth, West Australia is becoming such a powerhouse.
yeah.
With regards to your fighters, I always notice on Facebook they're talking about their power phase and tapering. I mean, I come from a bit of a strength and conditioning background, so I can kind of decipher a little bit what's going on. Just broadly, without giving away Riddler's secrets.
Yeah.
What's your structure? Like, I walk into Riddler's and I've never done Muay Thai before, and 5 years later, I'm Lloyd Dean wearing my shorts back to front.
Yep.
Where have I gone through that?
Basically how it happens. Yeah, like my guys that have started with me have gone through all the stages. You know, I've got beginners classes. They spent all their time in beginners classes. Then they go to intermediate classes, and then they start sparring in those classes when they've got the foundation and the understanding of defending and checking and covering.
Do you grade them, or do you?
No,
it's just a feel thing?
No, it's just a doing thing. When I can see that they've got it and they understand it, and they're not getting as much out of it as they should be, then it's time for that next level. You know, and all of my guys that have started with me have gone through that level. Over the years, I've had obviously people come to me from other gyms, and you're always going to get that. You know, those guys, I'll either start them very briefly in intermediates, depending on the level of fighter that they are, or they're straight into the fighters, and you know, we help add to their skill set over time.
Yeah.
You know, not try and change them too much, but add to what they've got, make it better.
Yeah, because it's something I was talking to Angie and Parr about as well, was that there's the perception of, and it's a common thing you hear, it's like, it's not the way the Thais do it. And for me, it's always been, we're starting with a different pool of people, a different size of people, a different age, with a different understanding of sport. So going about it the way you would introduce a 7-year-old at a camp, as opposed to a 19-year-old walking in, it's very different. Obviously, you guys have that structure in place that's paying off really well. At your gym now, do you guys purely Muay Thai, or do you do other sort of?
Our classes that we have are purely Muay Thai, but we have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at the gym. We have strength and conditioning classes. We've recently introduced HIIT classes, just moving with the times a little bit, high intensity interval, but we haven't changed our Muay Thai. Yeah.
And over the years, who are the bigger name fighters you've had coming out of the gym?
Kaylee Reece, for example. She might have heard of her. Eugene Eckelboom.
Yep.
Chris Tiger White.
Yes.
Kim Olsen, who's now living over here in Melbourne and got a gym. Chad Walker.
Yep.
Chad Stalker Walker. And plus a whole load of other guys that sort of were not superstars, but got to that sort of Australian title level and multiple state title level.
And Eugene and Kaylee both were WMC World Champions multiple times.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm fairly involved with WMC, and I'm obviously a little bit biased about it, but it's a title that there isn't that many WMC World Champions around.
Yeah.
Getting the guys up to that stage, did you find that it was harder trying to get an Australian a legitimate WMC world title shot, or was it just the fact that they just worked up and that the opponents were there?
They just worked up over time. You know, like Kaylee won WPMF world title first from the champion, an Italian lady. And then after that, she just had her stepping stone. She was very goal oriented. She had a list of people that she needed to fight and wanted to fight to just get up and up and up and up. So, and then she won an intercontinental title on the King's birthday fights one time in December. And so, world title was the next level from there. You know, Stefan Fox was very aware of who she was, and so the opportunities came.
Yeah, which was, I think, was like an interesting thing when she fought in line fight and she fought Tiffany.
Yeah.
And it felt like some of the Americans didn't know who Kaylee was and didn't know what clinching was.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not, but it was like, yeah, she's a WMC world champion. It's not a promotional world title; it's an actual legitimate world title, and you can see it's like there's that side of it.
Yeah.
Which has been really coming through the gym now. We're obviously, like, we know Lloyd Dean. He's fought on Rebellion a few times, and a few of the other guys. That new generation that's coming through. Who's your standout guys other than Lloyd that's coming through? That's come through your system.
Come through my system. Tyler Hardcastle has been with me from very early on. He actually started with Jack 300, so he was introduced to a good Thai style very early on. I think he had one fight under Jack, and then the rest have been with me. So I've really had a long, solid road with him. Developing him over time, and he's really coming into his himself now.
He's had two amazing head kick knockouts over his last two fights.
3 big knockouts in a row.
Oh yeah, because the one he had on against the Irish fighter from Blair's gym, I was seeing that, and you couldn't see it except for a replay, and then the one he got a couple of weeks ago was absolutely amazing. They're really good young guys. Got a WMC state title now, and probably up there for a national title soon.
He's actually just been confirmed last week to fight on Joe Hilton's
Coastal
Warfare for the Australian title.
Yeah, perfect.
So it's exciting stuff for him.
Yeah, looking at the entire country, who do you see as the standout fighters coming through now?
For the entire country, or just my fighters?
No, overall, who's catching your eye watching them fight?
So many. Queensland is always strong. WA has got so many, people like, when you've got guys like Lloyd Dean, Jordan Godfredson and Roy Wills all in the same state.
It's phenomenal.
And there's kind of been rules in place that don't allow them to fight for the same Australian title because they're from the same state. So, hopefully we can get something like that changed. So, a fight like that can happen.
Yeah.
You have so many on your show, so many good fighters. You're looking to put on the best. Ramesh, Barry, Oliver, so many. The girls are just going amazing. Like, I've probably got 10 girls in my team of fighters that are all just getting regular fights, and that seems to be the case on a lot of the shows. Epic, we seem to always have about 6 to 8 female fights on. You've had a whole bunch on your last Roots and Rebellion.
And it's more fighting. We had one Roots show, because Roots would do a few Muay fights, and the majority of the girls wanted to fight full Thai, and it was great. I was like, kind of stuck it to the boys a little bit in the changing room as well. You've got a particularly lanky young man training with you now.
Yes. Yes.
George Mann, who's going to be my main event in May.
Mm-hmm.
What's been like having George there? Because he's a very unassuming guy. You would never pick him as the first time he sent me a photo when he was going to fight on Rebellion against Alexi, I kept asking him to send me another photo because I thought if I put this up, it looks like the greatest stitch-up job in the world.
I actually did the same thing before he was with me when he was at Gab's gym. He was semi-main event, and I asked him for a new photo. I said, can you get one looking a little bit more manly? Just with a bit better posture, put your shoulders back and puff your chest out a bit. And which he had done. The new photos were a lot better.
Yeah, he asked me, so do you need anything else? I said, I need you to get a tan. It's just the color differential with Joachim Point is huge. Yeah, how's it training him? Because he's got a beautiful style to watch. Yeah. And he's obviously physically, I think he's one of the guys who fights, his style matches so well to his physicality. That's, he's not trying to be something he's not.
Yeah, he knows what his strengths are. He knows what his weaknesses are. We're working on improving some of the weaknesses to make him a better fighter. Definitely not trying to change him. He's got an awesome skill set, an unbelievable amount of experience. Far beyond his 30-odd pro fights. He's got nearly 100 amateur fights.
Yeah. He's only 19?
Yeah, 19. Yeah. Yep. So, he's a great young guy. He's an awesome asset to have in the gym. Super, super friendly guy. Speaks to anyone. He'll work and help with anyone. The person that he's working with, he doesn't just try and own that person. He'll help with them with some techniques and try this and that kind of thing. Great pad holder, loves working with people, so he's a massive asset to have in the gym, and I enjoy training him. So we're both really excited about this fight on Rebellion. Yeah,
me too. It's a definite style clash because obviously Jakob's the way he's fighting now, he's a strong fighter. He's a power puncher. Logia body kicks well, and that matchup, I was talking to Timo when we were looking at the main three guys that could fight him, and Lewis Regis was the first fight I'd offered because that's the promise I'd made to Lewis, and then it was George, and then Ben Mahoney was the other guy that always wanted a rematch, and we were like, out of style wise, the most intriguing one is George because he does pose so many different problems for people. A, his height, and B, he's which can take away from how skilled he is. Sometimes people just go, he's big. He's not just a tall guy. He's incredibly skilled. So really pumped for that fight.
He's got amazing skill set. He really does.
Yeah. With your promotion Epic that you run with Kaylee, how's that going? Where do you want to take it to next?
It's going well. Our last couple of shows, all our shows have been very steady. We've changed days on it. We've tried Sunday shows, we've tried Saturday shows, and by far our best shows have been our Friday night shows. The last three that we've done, we've had on Friday.
That's awesome.
Which saved any hassle of trying to get the venue on the night. Very limited venues in Perth, so it can be very difficult to get the Saturday night that you need to put your show because of all the other shows that are around, so you're not impeding on someone else's show or getting too close. So the Fridays have been awesome for us. The crowds have been brilliant. We don't actually have any real goals or direction in where we're trying to take Epic. We're not trying to make it any bigger than what it is. Our one and only reason for doing Epic is to keep our main fighters active, because without it, you've got fighters without fights, without direction, and then they're not in the gym, and then it can be difficult to keep them in the gym. Particularly the ones that have been doing it for many years. It's easier with the newer guys because it's easier to get the fights and there's more offers there. But unless someone has got a good name and they're getting tracked down, like Lloyd Dean or George Mann or someone like that, it can dry up. So it's really the one and only reason why we do Epic. Yep. So
I'll throw out a few names. Just tell me what your first thing that comes to mind about them.
Yeah.
Kaylee Reece.
Amazing, unbelievable work ethic. She was a dream to train. She's just absolute workhorse, and she still is now. She's still, she loves her CrossFit and strength and conditioning, and she may only have time to do 45 minutes or an hour in a day, but when she does it just with crazy intensity. She's just got this drive still that no one else can match, and it was what took her to where she did, where she went.
Yep. Lloyd Dean?
Workhorse. Just incredible cardio. The guy gives 110%, quite similar to Kaylee in that way. Everything is 110%. Unbelievable cardio. The guy just does not get tired or stop coming. Incredible heart. He's South African origin.
Oh, right.
And just incredibly tough.
Yep.
Incredibly tough.
Nugget?
Grandmaster, you might say. Phenomenal trainer, phenomenal pioneer in Australia, firstly as a fighter and then promoter. Like what he did with Evolution is just did the craziest things for Muay Thai in Australia, creating the names that, as we talked about before, are still around,
Yeah. Toby Smith?
A weapon. Yeah, unbelievable. Huge heart. Trains house down. I've not seen him train personally, only footage, but from what I know of him and the way he fights, man, he's hard to stop. He's hard to stop. Incredible talent. He's going to go as far as he wants to go.
Yeah. And finally, someone you've fought in the past. You mentioned earlier, probably my pet favourite fighter, Australian fighter, Soren.
Soren's super nice guy. We've got a good friendship, a lot of respect for one another. Obviously came up at around the same time, and for becoming, a phenomenal trainer. Yeah. Taking his experience as well, all the years and all the fights that he had in Thailand as well, and just using that to just be an awesome trainer.
And lastly, because I know you've got to get to a weigh-in tonight too, if there was one match you could see in Australia, other than Lloyd and Roy number 3 or Ramesh and Barry number 3, which I will do this year for you, both of them, if I can. I'll do a WA versus WA match in Melbourne. I reckon it would be a good idea. What would that match be?
Probably Lloyd Dean and Jordan Godfredson.
Yeah,
that was
a sick fight.
That was a sick fight. Again, mixed views on the result of that fight. So, what a way to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if there was a way to get those 3, just to fight each other back to back in one night would be great. Yeah. Round robin.
Or fourth person. We need a fourth person just to make up a 4-man.
Alexi's had a good run with Lloyd. Had a close fight.
Yep.
He had a fight with Roy as well, and I'm sure he's a daddy now, so it'll be a bit hard to get him in. But
that would be an amazing 4-man.
Yeah, we'll see. He gets on Facebook first and books it. Thank you very much, Darren. Really appreciate you coming down, man. Look forward to seeing you soon, and good luck tomorrow night, man. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
He looks so much less stressed than before.